What's up, YouTube? Derpdoor Weldor here, coming at you with another video. We're talking about the auto crane and the 350 here. So, the auto crane is back in service.
So me and Noah spent a really long time. We took the crane apart. We went through all the electrical in it. Big thanks to Noah, by the way, coming out and helping me with the crane. We went through all the electrical on it, especially in the pedestal. How this thing works is the actual top lifts off that pedestal and you can access everything. It was a cold day. It was just after we had all that snow. You can still see some snow around, but me and him, we took our time. We went through it. We replaced all the sketchy wiring we could find and really couldn't find much. So I pretty much was of the conclusion the motor was bad. So I took the motor to Bowden Electrical Motor Service in Rocky Mount. They got it fixed up for me. Real good people. It was a start switch, so they put in a new start switch for me.
So if you follow me on Instagram, you know me and Noah spent some time. We went through this thing. We redid some wiring, like we bumped up our wire going from the base here to the motor with a 14 gauge, went from a 16 to a 14 gauge to be less voltage drop. We redid a whole bunch of wiring stuff in here that looked kind of sketchy and funky. I even redid some wiring up in here in the solenoids, and when I was done, I put it back together. I silicone sealed all these back, and the reason I did that is because this thing, it lives outside, so you obviously don't want water in electrical stuff, duh. And when I got the motor back, I took the motor to an electrical motor shop and had them paid to have them rebuild it. And it's a good thing I did, because the centrifugal start switch was frozen and the bearings were worn out. So I got all that done for less than 200 bucks, and it's back in service. And when I got it back, first thing I did was right here where the electrical comes in. You can see I silicone sealed that. Where my capacitor sits, you can see I silicone sealed the capacitor in there. So now the motor's pretty much good to live outside, because where all the access ports are where water could get straight into the motor like it was doing before is now all sealed up. So hopefully we won't have any more problems. And also, as y'all are going to see, this crane also runs a whole lot smoother. It just sounds so much better. There we go. Ah, beautiful. So, as you can see, auto crane is back in service. Next thing I'm going to do is paint it. So it'll be blue and it'll match everything else on the truck. I may paint the motor part black. I've made up my mind. I may just say screw it, paint the whole thing blue. But F350, still tracking down the gremlins and crap in this thing. And I'll take any ideas y'all have. It has a weird misfire, you know, it's very inconsistent, and I'm really going for is the ignition system. I went through my timing and I did my timing map. I mapped out my timing. So before we go saying it's a timing issue, I know it's not a timing issue, okay? I know for a fact it's not a timing issue. So this thing with the HEI that's in here, the mechanical advance, gets right up to about 32 degrees of maximum advance at full throttle. Now if the vacuum advance hooked up, it goes way past that. So I unhooked the vacuum advance. The vacuum advance was part of the problem because you'd floor it, a vacuum advance would kick in, and this thing would be getting like 50, 60 degrees before top dead center of ignition timing. It was just all sorts of out of whack. You can't even drive like that. So unhooked, it runs fine, except for coming off of a stop or moving, coming off of a stop or, going to re-accelerate. It'll backfire, stutter, then it kind of picks up and moves. I was thinking, oh, accelerator pump, right, on the carburetor, but it's not the accelerator pump on the carburetor, because I went in there and the accelerator pump works just fine. You can press the accelerator pump and you see 2 shots go pew in there. It's 2 nice fine straight streams, nothing funky looking. So it's not the accelerator pump and it's not the timing. So I'm thinking somebody put a really cheap HEI on here, and I think the HEI is acting funky. I've read that some of these cheap aftermarket HEIs will do stuff like this. In fact, when I brought this truck home for the first time, it actually, about halfway home, just completely shut off. I had no spark whatsoever getting to any of the spark plugs. And my first thought was, it's something wiring related, not the actual HEI. But I think now, at this point, I think it's something in the HEI going flaky. And I also noticed with this HEI, I got 2 theories on it. I'll show y'all what I'm talking about here in just a second. If you look on the HEI here, there are these numbers. 4. There should be a 3 on here, but what's funny is the 3 on this goes around to my spark plug number 1. Now, this may have been like a more universal HEI meant for like 3 or 4 different engines. So if that's the case, I have no way of knowing if all these spark plugs go to the right plugs in the correct order, because I don't have the instruction kit for this HEI. So my next step I'm going to do is I'm going to test my fuel pressure, make sure I'm getting enough fuel pressure. Just want to rule that out, make sure it's not the fuel pump or not something fuel related. If that comes out good, if that checks good, I'm going to replace all the plugs and wires. And of course, there's going to be other issues. I still got some brake issues to deal with. I can't get for whatever reason, I still got a mushy brake in the truck. Haven't quite figured out what's causing that yet. So I'm going to try to do a better bleed. I'm actually going to get a vacuum bleeder, and I'm going to vacuum bleed the brakes on this truck here, because only God knows, there could be some kind of crap in there or whatnot. But progress. We got progress. I mean, the crane, right now, I really wanted to get this crane back in order so I could start moving stuff around the yard if I need to. Because the truck will move, it'll drive around the yard just fine. But once I get onto the road and up to the road, it starts having problems. And it's just undrivable. And I can get an HEI for this truck pretty cheap. I can get a decent HEI for about $120 to replace that one that's on there. So it's not a big deal. And, after if I replace spark plug wires, and put a new HEI on there, I don't have to worry about anything in the ignition system for a good long time. Now, my plan is, if that doesn't fix it, I'm then going to just go buy a new carburetor and stick a new carburetor on there that's specifically meant for this engine and truck and everything, because I don't know if they got the wrong jets in there, or somebody went in there and did something stupid and put the wrong jets in it or whatnot. I don't know. So I figure it's just replace, put new in there, don't worry about it. And yeah, that's the plan. And the brakes, I've already done all the brakes and everything. Tires are going to be once I have this truck running like it's supposed to. So I'm not putting tires on this truck until I know it runs like it's supposed to. Because right now, I'm just going to keep the crappy tires on there, and that's a big immediate upfront investment, a good investment on the truck, obviously, 6 new tires. But I need to have this truck running. I need to have this truck operating like it's supposed to before I go put tires on there. And then it sits for another 6 months and I have my brand new tires rot off of it. So there we go. Now I'm going to be testing the fuel pressure of the truck. I got one of those rent-a-tool kits or whatever, or borrow tool loaner, whatever you want to call it, kits from a local O'Reilly's. And it's pretty freaking simple. Alright, it's not rocket science how to set this up. Comes with this little adapter right here. This is for all the old style systems like I got. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to unhook that hose right there, hook that hose into the back of this, and then hook the front of this into the carburetor. And then it has this little spot right on top there that I hook the gauge in. There we go. Now it's in line. Now all we do, hook this in. Hooked up. Getting right about at 5 psi, which is what this truck is supposed to get in anywhere.
Next thing I did was I went through and tested all my cylinder pressure. As you can see, this the lowest cylinder pressure that I got was about 110 psi. Which I guess is okay. Everything I've read seems like that's alright. The most I got was 120. So 120 at the high, 110 at the low. But I noticed some other things I was taking apart. Yeah, look at that. That is just a beautiful spark plug. That's exactly how you want your spark plug to look. And look at that boot. Look at that rust in there. That is awful. And I noticed the spark plugs are all black. So that could be a problem too. There it is right there. Pop, pop. There we go. Put it in gear, get a little gas. As soon as the choke opens, it acts up. I get a bunch of gas. And I still can't get over this freaking hobo gauge sitting in here under the hood. It's an oil pressure gauge. That's 60 right there. You can see the needles right there. So we're getting good pressure. I mean, that's probably about 40 psi sitting right there. That's what I'm guessing, that's 40. So we're getting good oil pressure. So at this point, I decided time to change oil. And the reason I put 10W40 in there is because I was going to mix in some Mercon in there, kind of do a flush. And here's my vacuum test. Vacuum turned out good. Now what was interesting was I went to replace the ignition coil and I noticed it was backwards. The polarity, somebody had switched it in there. And also I noticed that my old ignition coil was nasty as all get out. I mean, look at this. There's a new one on the bottom and the old one on the top. That is disgusting. So put the new one back in there, got it all set up, and still had problems. So I pulled out a timing light, and sure enough, that was the issue. YouTube, you guys ain't even gonna believe this, all right? This video has been across, 4 or 5, about 5 days of just farting with this truck, and I finally figured out what was wrong. It took me a good long time, but I finally figured out. It was the base timing advance. So my base ignition timing, there we go, that's what it's called, base ignition timing. So I went online, did some Googling around, and people are like, oh yeah, you know, the 390 is supposed to start at 6 degrees before top dead center. That's where I set mine. And a bunch of people said that, and I was like, all right, so I guess it's got to be 6 degrees or somewhere around that, right? Man, and I noticed after I did, that's when I really started having problems, and I didn't make the connection. What it was my timing was too retarded. This truck, I had to set it. I set it at 10 degrees to restart. Like, I'm going to start at 10 degrees, see what happens. I started at 10 degrees. It was better, only backfired a couple times. I was driving around. Then, I was like, all right, I must be heading in the right direction. And then, I reset the timing for 12 degrees. Only backfired once, and seemed much better. So I had a lot more power. So then I reset it for 14 degrees before top dead center and drove it around. I was like, man, this thing's driving great. Went and picked up my helper. I was like, hey, man, you know, you sit in this thing and tell me I ain't going crazy, right? It ain't backfiring or nothing. We're like, no, this is great. So we're like, okay, drove it around, nothing happened. I was like, sweet, that must be it. So how I eventually decided I have to do this is I have to set this timing, because I don't have the vacuum advance hooked up, so I have to set this timing to where it tops out at the high end. So basically, it needs to be where when it's at full throttle, it's at 36 degrees before top dead center, and that's how I set my timing, then let that off, and wherever it rests is where it rests. I could probably get away with 16 degrees before top dead center, but I ain't gonna push it. I'm gonna save that for another day. Right now, the mystery of the F350 has finally been solved after so much work. But other things, well, it was a good thing I did go through all this stuff, because other things, you know, the ignition coil was hooked up backwards. I mean, that's like, you know, what the heck? You know, a backwards ignition coil, come on, guys. You know, backwards ignition coil, needed new plugs and wires anyway. You know, there's a whole bunch of stuff that this truck did need. So it was a good thing that I did go through it like I did. Found a bunch of, you know, weird, strange stuff in there. Got it taken care of. And I know for a fact now I have no vacuum leaks. The carburetor's working like it's supposed to. Could use a little bit more tuning, but, you know, whatever, right? So, thank you guys for watching this video. If you like it, please be sure to hit that like button and subscribe. And you guys have a fantastic day.